Friðrik Ólafsson, still alive as Ólafsson. He was born January 26, 1935, which means he's approaching his 90th birthday this coming January. We're just 6 months away from it, aren't we? Ólafsson is an Icelandic chess grandmaster, and he was president of FIDE from 1978 to 1982. Ólafsson is a 6-time Icelandic chess champion, 2-time Nordic chess champion. The 1958 interzonal that qualified him to play in this event was his best performance in World Chess Championship competition. He finished in 5th place in that event. Ólafsson with pawn d4 here, and no surprise to see knight f6. Bobby, a King's Indian player. c4, g6 is the King's Indian defense. g3, bishop g7, bishop g2 is your fianchetto variation. After bishop g2, we castle. Knight f3, pawn d6. Here, white castles. And this is Oscar Pano's system. Oscar Pano, a Argentine grandmaster. Knight c6 here. Pawn d5 hits the knight. Knight a5. It's this pawn right here. King's knight comes to the d2 square, opening this diagonal up a bit. Pawn c5, knight c3, pawn e5, pawn a3, preparing pawn b4, pawn b6, pawn b4 is in fact played, but the purpose of pawn b6 was to vacate the b7 square, so knight b7. Rook b1, not the most common move. More frequent is bishop b2, but not the choice of Ólafsson today. Rook b1 by Friðrik Ólafsson. Knight e8, unobstructing the f-man, and this knight can come to c7 in a lot of these lines. I've played that move quite a few times myself. So after knight e8, and by the way, I should point out, there are a couple of other options here. Knight g4 is also frequently played, although marked inaccurate here. It's played just as often as knight e8. Another option is bishop d7 here, not as frequently played. Bobby with knight e8. Knight d e4, pawn f5, no surprises there. Knight g5, that's defended by the bishop, in case you were wondering. Weaker is to play the bishop to g5. Might be tempting because it hits the queen. After queen d7, and bishop h3, I'll play queen c7, and after b takes c5, I will pawn takes the knight, baby. And on bishop takes the bishop, my queen will take the bishop. And I think I'm okay here. In fact, the eval bar gives me the splinters advantage in this line. So, weaker, my point is that bishop g5 is weaker than the knight g5. After knight g5, e4, and here it looks like the eval bar is giving white the splinter's edge. Queen b3, the bot calling for rook b3. It seems queen c2 in my mind should be okay as well, and I get a star. Queen b3, though, from Ólafsson. Queen f6, battery attacking this knight, which is only defended by the queen at present. So, knight d1 moving to safety. h6, kicking this knight out of there. And this knight only has one safe square of egress, and that's the h3 square. g5 is next played. This poor knight is completely cut off now. It cannot come to the f4 square as it's now hot. f3 vacating a square for this knight to perhaps worm its way back into the game. Pawn takes the pawn, pawn takes the pawn, and bishop d7 is now played. Pawn f4, pawn g4, compelling the knight to go to the f2 square. Knight hf2. Knight c7, as mentioned earlier, is often played in these lines. The bot calling for queen g6. My preference was queen e6. Get on this nice wide open file. I get a check mark for that move. Bobby with knight c7. Knight d3, queen's rook to e8, grabbing the open file. Bishop b2, interrogating our queen. And then, of course, that makes the d4 square off limits to our queen as well, doesn't it? So queen f7, queen c2, knight a6 here. The bot calling for rook e7. And that has with it the idea of king's rook to e8, forming a battery on the open file. Instead, knight a6 was played. Bishop c3, adding a lot of support to this b-man. It is 4 times defended now. That's a lot of defenders. Pawn h5 was played here, and then the knight on d1 to b2. Now the bot calling for rook to e1. Obviously, the purpose of rook e1 is to contest the open file. And you hear me talk a lot about the open file. Well, rooks love to be on open files. That's their route of access into their enemy's territory. In this game, knight d1, b2. Pawn h4, now rook fe1. Pawn h3, bishop to f1, bishop f6, rook takes rook on e8, rook takes the rook e1, rook takes the rook, bishop takes the rook. Pawn takes the pawn on b4. Pawn takes the pawn. And now bishop d4 check is played. Bishop f2 interposes. Bishop takes the bishop with check. Queen takes the bishop. After queen takes the bishop, queen f6 is played. Knight d1. And that opens the line for the queen to come over here to a2 and attack along this line. So to prevent that, queen to a1 was played. Knight e3. Now queen c3. Knight back to d1, queen takes the pawn on c4. The bot says go back and repeat the position. This is a little bit precarious since it moves in the line of the bishop's fire. So bot calling for queen a1, apparently a better way. And then we could assume that just a nothing move could be made. Bishop here to e2, and then we would want to bring in our king perhaps. Bobby takes the pawn. Knight to e5. Discovering an attack on the bishop, and it's a double attack. Knight e1, apparently the more effective discovered attack on the queen, but seems like it's 6 of the one and a half dozen of the other. Here queen c1 was played, and looking at the eval bar, we see that this is dead equal. Knight takes d7, queen takes the knight on d1, and queen b2 was played here. Coming to f6, which is a pretty strong threat. But after queen e1, draw offer was made, and the draw was accepted. So another draw. Let's go look at this. 97.2 and 97.4. So another very high accuracy on both sides of the board. Scrolling down, we see 2850 single game rating for both players. Another very competitive game, and another game in which Bobby Fischer's opening was on another level. Both players with an incredible middle game.